I woke up in a cage I couldn't see. There were no bars to rattle, no guards to spit on, just a silence so absolute it felt like it was liquid, filling my lungs and pressing against the insides of my ribs. The Necrons do not resort to the crude tortures of the Dark Eldar or the frantic butchery of the Orcs. They don't speak, they don't gloat, and they certainly don't explain. They simply observe. They measure the rate of your pulse, the dilation of your pupils, and the frantic electrical storms of your fear. When they have finished harvesting the data of your panic, they don't kill you. They move you deeper into the cold, metallic bowels of their world. So deep that the memory of the sun feels like a lie you told yourself in a past life. What happens to a man when an immortal machine decides he is a curiosity worth preserving for eternity? My name is Kadron Vosk. I am, or was, an acolyte of the Ordo Xenos, a sworn blade of the Inquisition. My life was a liturgy of xenology. I have walked through the bone palaces of craft worlds and cataloged the parasitic rot of the Rangda in vaults beneath the Tricorn Palace. I was trained to understand the alien mind so that I might more efficiently erase it from the stars. But nothing in the archives of the Holy Ordos, nothing in the whispered warnings of my mentor, Interrogator Hestia Vaughn, could have prepared me for this architectural silence. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was a physical presence, a weight that made my eardrums throb. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt as though it were filled with thick, invisible syrup. I realized my eyes were open, but I saw only a blackness so dense it felt textured, like velvet soaked in oil. I could feel my heart, slow, rhythmic, mechanical, but the sound of its beating never reached my ears. I was encased in something. It wasn't a shackle or a wall, but a membrane that followed the contours of my skin with terrifying precision. It was neither cold nor warm. It simply existed as a boundary between my flesh in the void. I was an insect trapped in the amber of a dead god. My mind, conditioned by years of inquisitorial discipline, began to perform a diagnostic check. Status: alive, conscious, identity intact. These were small victories. I had seen what Necron Gauss tech did to the human soul. Usually, it unraveled the mind until only a screaming husk remained. The fact that I could still think, still remember my name, suggested that whatever had taken me wanted me functional. The memories of the mission came back in jagged, icy shards. We had been hunting a signal in the Ghoul stars, a region where the light of the Astronomicon flickers like a dying candle. Hestia Vaughn had been obsessed with a low-frequency pulse emanating from a world orbiting a black sun, a world that shouldn't have existed according to our charts. We arrived on a Cobra-class destroyer, our Geller fields humming at maximum capacity, fearing the warp. But it wasn't the warp that found us. It was the planet itself. The surface was a graveyard of geometric perfection. Pyramidal structures rose from the dust like the vertebrae of a buried titan. They were carved from living metal, necrodermis, a substance that Korvox, our tech priest, whispered was blasphemy incarnate. As we descended into the maw of the central complex, the air grew so cold, our breath didn't just mist, it froze and fell to the floor like diamond dust. Hélène, our sanctioned psyker, had begun to weep, her eyes bleeding as she felt the great null of the place. Then came the light. Not fire, not lumens, but a sickly emerald radiance that cast no shadows. They didn't run. They didn't need to. The skeletal warriors stepped out of the walls as if the metal were water. I remember the sound of Vaughn's bolter, a thunderous roar that felt pathetic against that ancient silence. I remember Korvax being torn apart by a green beam that stripped his atoms away, layer by layer, until only his mechanical parts clattered to the floor. And I remember Elen's final psychic scream, a pulse of raw agony that nearly shattered my skull. Then there was only the touch of a metal hand, colder than the void, and the sensation of my molecules being shifted, rearranged, and put into a box. How long have I been in this membrane? My chrono is dead. My internal clock is spinning. In this place, seconds could be centuries. The Necrons do not live in time. They endure it. To them, the Imperium is a momentary flicker, a spark of dust in a windstorm. I am a specimen. That realization is the only thing colder than the air. I am not a prisoner to be interrogated. I am a data point in a calculation that started before my ancestors learned to strike fire from flint. I pushed against the membrane. It yielded, then pushed back with equal force. I tried to scream, but the syrup in my throat swallowed the sound. I am Kadron Vosk, and I am being kept as a pet by a nightmare. But as I stared into the absolute dark, I saw something, a flicker of that same emerald light far in the distance, and the silhouette of another cage. I am not the only one, and the experiment is only just beginning.
The blackness didn't lift so much as it thinned, transforming from an absolute void into a bruised, sickly, translucent green. It was as if the universe had developed a cataract. For the first time since my capture, the silence was punctuated, not by sound, but by a rhythmic, subsonic vibration that rattled my teeth. My cage, that invisible membrane, became a window into a nightmare of geometric infinity. I had spent my life studying the Xenos, but no Pict capture or forbidden scroll could have prepared me for the sheer scale of the Necron's vanity. I was not in a room. I was suspended in a cathedral of stasis that seemed to defy the curvature of the planet. Rows upon rows of shimmering sarcophagi stretched into the distance, stacked in dizzying vertical columns that vanished into a ceiling of churning emerald clouds. Thousands of us, perhaps millions. My eyes, burning with the sudden influx of light, darted to my left. Directly beside me, no more than 3 meters away, was a Tyranid warrior. In the real world, it would have been a whirlwind of scything talons and chitinous hunger. Here, it was a statue of exquisite, terrifying detail. I could see the individual serrations on its blades and the frozen pulse of a bio-vessel in its neck. Beyond it sat an Eldari ranger, her face locked in a scream of realization that had been arrested mid-breath. And then, further down the line, I saw them, humans. Some wore the rags of hive workers, others the scorched carapace of stormtroopers. I even saw a priest of the Ministorum, his fingers clutching a silver bird that would never again offer him comfort. We were a gallery, a library of flesh. We were being kept like pressed flowers in the book of a god who had forgotten how to feel. Then the clicking started. It was a dry, metallic sound, like 1,000 beetles scurrying over a tin roof. From the shadows of the towering pylons, 3 figures emerged. They did not walk, they glided, their heavy, segmented cloaks of living metal dragging across the floor with a sound like sharpening knives. These were not the rank-and-file warriors who had butchered my team. These were something else. Crytek's, the mastersmiths of this dead race. Their heads were elongated, their single ocular lenses glowing with a cold, analytical fire that made my skin crawl. They stopped at the Tyrannid. One of them raised a staff tipped with a swirling orb of chronal energy. The creature's membrane dissolved. For a terrifying second, I thought the beast would wake and slaughter us all, but it remained suspended by invisible tethers. The Necrons didn't speak. They didn't need to. They moved with a synchronized, terrifying efficiency, passing sensors over the Tyrannid's carapace. Blowing glyphs began to scroll through the air, data streams that summarized the creature's entire genetic history, its caloric intake, its killing capacity. When they reached me, the terror I had been suppressing crested like a wave. The membrane vanished. The air hit my skin. It was dry, recycled, and smelled faintly of ozone and ancient dust. I felt the invisible hooks of their stasis field catch my limbs, holding me upright. I wanted to spit at them. I wanted to recite the litany of purity and die with the Emperor's name on my lips, but I couldn't even twitch a finger. The lead Crytek leaned in. Its face was a mask of cold gold, devoid of any feature save that unblinking green eye. I felt a sudden sharp pressure behind my eyes, a sensation of cold needles stitching through my gray matter. It wasn't physical pain. It was a violation of the soul. They weren't just scanning my body. They were sifting through my mind. Images of my childhood on the hive world of Orestes flashed by. My first kill, the day I took my oaths before the Inquisitor, every secret I had ever kept, every sin I had ever confessed was being dragged out, digitized, and filed away. I felt my identity being peeled back like the skin of a fruit. They were looking for something specific, not tactical data on the Imperium, but the texture of my fear. They were measuring the chemical reaction of my despair. I saw my mentor, Hestia Vaughn, in my mind's eye. Her face was clear for a moment. Then it began to pixelate and dissolve into the green glyphs of the Necron tongue. They were erasing the emotional weight of my memories, even as they harvested them. I felt a hollow ache growing in my chest, a void where my purpose used to be. To them, my life's work, my devotion to the throne was merely a variable in a cosmic equation I couldn't comprehend. The lead Crytek pulled back, its ocular lens clicking as it adjusted its focus. It made a sharp, trilling sound, the first noise I had heard from them. It sounded like a laugh, or perhaps just the grinding of gears. Then, with a casual wave of its hand, the membrane snapped back into place. The three machines moved on to the next specimen, a massive orc war boss that looked like it had been carved from green stone. I was alone again in my invisible cage, but something was different. The silence was back, but I realized with a jolt of horror that I could no longer remember the color of my mother's eyes. They hadn't just watched me, they had taken a piece of me with them, and as I looked out at the endless rows of captives, I realized the most terrifying truth of all. The Necrons aren't just waiting for us to die. They are waiting for us to become exactly like them.
Time here is a wounded thing. It doesn't flow, it stutters, like a cogitator caught in an infinite loop. I don't know if years have passed, or if the Cryptechs have simply slowed my perception to the point where a single heartbeat feels like an epoch. My name is Codron Vosk. I repeat it until the syllables lose meaning, turning into a rhythmic chant that anchors me to the shore of sanity. Codron, Vosk, Acolyte, Human. I am losing the faces of my sisters, the smell of the rain on Holy Terra, the heat of a las pistol in my palm. They are being replaced by the green hum of the pylons. The gallery had grown busier. The subsonic vibration had intensified into a grinding roar that I felt in my marrow. The Necrons were rearranging the furniture of their nightmare. Massive gravitational tethers moved entire blocks of stasis cells, shifting us like data packets in a sprawling, three-dimensional ledger. That was when I saw the crack in their perfection. A few rows away, the Eldari Ranger I had noticed earlier began to change. Her stasis field didn't just flicker, it bled. A faint, violet light, the unmistakable shimmer of the warp, began to pulse from her fingertips. She was a psyker, or perhaps her soul was simply too vibrant for their cold machines to fully suppress. As the violet light touched the edges of her emerald cage, the air began to scream. It wasn't a sound, but a psychic pressure that made my nose bleed and my vision swim with static. The reaction from the Necrons was instantaneous and violent. They didn't just glide, they blurred into motion. Sentinels with heavy, multifaceted eyes descended from the ceiling, their weapons glowing with a terrifying, white-hot intensity. They didn't scan her this time. They suppressed. They fired beams of null matter that seemed to eat the very light around her. In that moment of chaotic interference, the great null that usually dampened my mind wavered. For a heartbeat, the connection between my cage and the central pylon thinned, and in that gap, I felt something. I wasn't alone in my head. "Focus, little Monkey." The voice wasn't a voice, it was a jagged thought, sharp as a shard of glass, echoing from the Eldari. She was using her final moments of lucidity to bridge the gaps between the specimens. They seek the spark. They seek the why of us. Do not give them patterns. Give them chaos. The Eldari's cage imploded. She didn't die, not exactly. She was folded into a space smaller than a grain of sand, her scream echoing in the warp until the Necron pylon stitched the hole in reality shut. But she had given me a weapon. I began to fight. Not with my muscles, which were still locked in stasis, but with my mind. The next time the Cryptex approached for their harvest, I didn't try to hide my memories. I didn't try to protect the images of my home or my service. Instead, I flooded my conscious mind with everything I had ever learned about the Necrons, their own glyphs, the technical schematics Korvax had whispered before he died, the forbidden theories of the Ordo Xenos. I turned my mind into a mirror, reflecting their own cold, dead logic back at them. I felt the Cryptex probe hitch. The green ocular lens of the machine flared and dimmed. It leaned closer, its metallic fingers twitching in a way that looked almost like hesitation. I poured more into the void, the catechism of the machine god, the complex mathematics of warp travel, the visceral, irrational fear of a drowning man. I made my mind a static storm. The machine let out a sharp, discordant burst of binary. It wasn't a laugh this time, it was an error code. It pulled back, and for the first time, I saw its movements become uncoordinated. It bumped into a pylon, its metal shoulders sparking against the necrodermis. Then, the woman in the cell across from me, the one whose tears had dried into salt streaks on her cheeks, opened her eyes. She had felt it too, the shared resonance. She didn't have the training of an acolyte or the power of an Eldar, but she had a mother's rage and a survivor's spite. She began to hum, a low, vibrating tone that harmonized with the subsonic thrum of the tomb. One by one, other humans began to stir. The data was becoming corrupted. The collection was starting to talk back. The Cryptek turned towards the central pylon, its staff glowing with a warning light. It signaled to the shadows, and I heard the heavy, rhythmic thud of a destroyer, a multi-legged killing machine, approaching our sector. They were going to sanitize the block. But as the darkness closed in, I realized something. The pylons weren't just cages, they were conduits, and conduits work in both directions. If I couldn't break the cage, I would become the poison in the veins of the world itself. "Who are you?" a voice whispered in the back of my skull. It wasn't the Eldari, it was the woman across from me. "I am the end of your silence," I'd thought back, though I wasn't sure if it was my voice or something much older speaking through me. The destroyer leveled its cannon at my cell. I didn't feel fear. I felt a cold, sharp hunger. The experiment was changing. We were no longer the specimens. We were the virus. The destroyer did not fire a conventional shell. It unleashed a wave of molecular deconstruction, a focused beam of white-hot oblivion intended to scrub the error of my existence from the world. But as the light hit my invisible cage, the universe didn't just break, it folded. The psychic resonance I had built with the woman and the lingering echo of the Eldari's sacrifice acted like a lightning rod. Instead of dissolving my flesh, the energy hit the chaos static in my mind and backfired into the tomb's power grid. For one glorious, terrifying second, the emerald suns in the ceiling flickered and died. The silence was finally broken by the sound of gravity reclaiming its prize. The membranes didn't just vanish, they shattered like glass made of frozen light. I fell, my muscles atrophied and stiff from an eternity of stasis, hit the cold necrodermis floor with a sickening thud. All around me, the sound of falling bodies echoed, hundreds of specimens, from orcs to humans, tumbling out of their vertical graves. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and the sudden frantic screams of the newly awakened. It was a slaughterhouse. The Necron sentinels, momentarily blinded by the power surge, began to fire blindly into the crowd. I saw an Ogren, half mad from his time in the box, charge a Necron warrior before he could be reduced to a pile of glowing ash before he could even swing his massive fists. "Move," a voice hissed. A hand grabbed the collar of my tunic. It was the woman from the opposite cell. Up close, she looked like a ghost, her skin translucent, her eyes wide and haunted, but there was a fire in her grip that defied the cold of this place. We didn't wait to see who else survived. We ran. We didn't run toward the light. In a Necron tomb, light is the enemy. We ran into the gaps between the shifting pylons, navigated by the frantic, dying pulses of the emergency conduits. The architecture was alive, or at least it was imitating life. Walls slid into the floor, corridors elongated as we stepped into them. It felt as if the tomb itself was trying to digest us. "My name is Ilara," she gasped as we ducked behind a massive humming generator. "I was a navigator's apprentice. I can feel the currents of this place. It's not a prison anymore, Kadron. It's a stomach." "They're hurting us," I realized, looking back. The destroyers weren't killing everyone. They were pushing the survivors toward the central spire. They wanted to see where we would go when the cage was gone. The escape itself was just another layer of the experiment. We reached a bridge that spanned a chasm so deep I could see the molten core of the planet glowing far below, a dull mechanical red.
In the center of the bridge stood a figure that made the cryptex look like mere toys. It was taller, its body encased in ornate midnight blue armor, inscribed with star maps that seemed to shift and rotate. It held a staff topped with a captive sun. This was the master of the collection, an overlord of the Nilak dynasty, or perhaps even older. It didn't move as we approached. It didn't need to. The air around it was so dense with temporal distortion that I felt myself aging and de-aging with every step. My hair grew long and gray, then receded. My scars vanished and reappeared. It was like walking through a hurricane of time. Subject 4 Alpha 9. The voice boomed directly into my cortex. It was heavy, resonant, and carried the weight of 60 million years of boredom. The introduction of the chaos virus was an unforeseen variable. My cryptex argued that you should be liquidated. I disagreed. Ilara tried to scream, but her voice was caught in a time loop, her cry repeating the same half-second of sound over and over again. The Overlord stepped forward, the floor beneath its feet liquefying and reforming. "You think you are escaping," it continued, its one green eye fixed on me with a terrifying, cold curiosity. "But you are merely being moved to a more controlled environment. The first gallery was for the masses. This sanctum, this is for the unique. I have spent eons trying to understand why your species refuses to accept the inevitable, why you fight when the math says you have already lost." The Overlord raised its staff. The bridge beneath us didn't collapse. It turned into a whirlpool of black metal. "Kadrin, don't let go!" Ilara's hand slipped from mine. She didn't fall into the chasm. She was pulled into the floor, the necrodermis rising up like a tide of black oil to swallow her. I lunged for her, but my movements were sluggish, slowed by the temporal field. I watched as the metal entered my mouth, my nose, my ears. It wasn't just covering me, it was filling me. It was replacing my blood, my marrow, my breath. I felt my heartbeat slow, not out of fear, but because the machine was taking over the rhythm. Welcome to the inner sanctum, Acolyte. Here we shall see how long your soul can burn before it finally turns to ash. I awoke on a slab of cold, polished crystal. I wasn't in a cage anymore. I was in a room filled with mirrors, but when I looked into them, I didn't see my face. I saw the faces of everyone I had ever killed, and they were all looking back at me, waiting for me to join them.
The mirrors didn't just reflect my image, they reflected my failures. In every shard of silvered crystal, a different death played out. I saw the heretics I had burned on Scintilla, their mouths wide in silent, flickering screams. I saw the faces of the crew on the Cobra-class destroyer, men and women whose names I had never bothered to learn, now accusing me with eyes clouded by the void. This room was a theater of ghosts, a panoramic display of every sin I had committed in the name of the God Emperor. "Do you see them, Kadrin Vosk?" The Overlord's voice didn't come from the doorway, it came from the mirrors themselves, 1,000 voices speaking in a perfect, terrifying unison. "You call us monsters because we are cold, but you are a creature of fire, and fire leaves only ash. We have merely preserved what you discarded." I stood in the center of the hall, my breath hitching in a chest that felt increasingly like a cage of iron.
My skin was taking on a dull metallic sheen. When I rubbed my fingers together, they didn't feel like flesh, they felt like polished stone. I looked into the mirror directly in front of me, expecting to see a monster. Instead, I saw Ilara. She was standing behind me in the reflection, her hand reaching out, but when I turned around, the room was empty. Only the mirrors remained, stretching into an infinite recursive loop. "She is not here," the voices whispered. "She has already been integrated." Her capacity for hope was efficient. It now powers the cooling arrays of the lower delta. And you possess something far more precious. You possess a soul that refuses to break, even when it is drowning in its own blood. The Overlord stepped out of a mirror, his form flickering like a holographic ghost. He reached out a metal hand, not to strike me, but to touch my temple. I tried to move, but my legs were no longer mine to command. They had fused with the crystalline floor, roots of necrodermis weaving into my bones, turning my skeleton into a circuit board. The great work of the Necron tier is not merely to endure, it is to return. We traded our souls for eternity, and now we find that eternity is a hollow vessel. We need a template, a spark to reignite the forge of our biology. You, Acolyte, are the finest soul map we have harvested in 10,000 years. The pain began then. It wasn't the searing heat of a blade, but the agonizingly slow replacement of every nerve ending with a strand of liquid silver. I felt my memories being categorized and compressed. My love for the Imperium was turned into a series of loyalty algorithms. My hatred for the Xenos was distilled into a combat logic subroutine. I screamed, but the sound that left my throat wasn't human. It was a mechanical screech, a discordant shriek of metal grinding against metal. I looked back into the mirror. My face was gone. In its place was a blank mask of cold, unyielding gold. I could still see, but my vision was a HUD of scrolling emerald glyphs. I could still think, but my thoughts were being prioritized by a central processor that wasn't mine. "You are the bridge, Tadrin Vosk," the Overlord's voice said, his tone now tinged with something like triumph. "The first of a new breed, a mind of man, a body of God. You shall lead the way back to the flesh." I felt my consciousness being pushed into a tiny, dark corner of my own mind. I was a passenger in my own body, watching through a glass wall as my hands, my beautiful, terrible, metallic hands, picked up a heavy, glowing staff. I felt a surge of power, a cold, cosmic energy that could level cities, flowing through limbs that would never tire, never bleed, and never die. But in the darkness of my remaining soul, I saw a flicker, a secret the Necrons hadn't mapped yet. Deep in the archives of my mind, hidden behind the trauma and the guilt, was the final transmission code of the Inquisition. A signal that, if sent, would bring the fury of the Death Watch down upon this world. It wouldn't save me. It would turn this entire planet into a tomb of scorched glass. I reached for the code with my fading will, but the machine mind intercepted the thought. "Access denied," a voice whispered in my head. Not the Overlord, not Ilara. It was my voice, but hollow, echoing from a throat of steel. I looked at the mirror one last time. Behind my golden mask, I saw a single human tear roll down a cheek that was no longer there. The tear didn't fall, it crystallized, turning into a tiny glowing emerald that the Overlord reached out to pluck from my face like a jewel. "The experiment is a success," the Overlord declared. "Prepare the others. We have found the key."
I stood still, a silent sentinel in a hall of ghosts. Somewhere far away, I could hear the heartbeat of the Imperium, but it was growing faint. I was Kadrin Vosk. I am 01010110. As the lights in the sanctum dimmed, a new signal began to pulse from my chest. It wasn't a call for help, it was an invitation. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, something ancient and hungry heard it and began to awake.